Okay, so today is the first episode ever of Real Talk with Bethany. My first guest is someone I trust deeply, personally and professionally. Let's just start there. Brandi Lavoie and I first met in 2020 when we were both working at the University of Utah. What started as colleagues quickly turned into a friendship that has shaped how I think, how I lead, and how I show up for people. Brandi is shamelessly one of my best friends. We talk constantly about work, life, leadership, boundaries, mistakes, wins, grief, growth, all of it. And I don't believe that disqualifies her from being here. I think it's exactly why she should be here. So we're going to have a great conversation. Brandi has spent her entire career mentoring, often quietly, often without the title, students, employees, and professionals who needed someone to notice them, advocate for them, tell them the truth with care. She's led large student teams, built programs from the ground up, and created spaces where people felt both supported and challenged to grow. Her insight on mentorship isn't theoretical, it's lived, it's practical, it's relational, and it's rooted in showing up consistently even when it's inconvenient or unseen. I'm really grateful she said yes to being my first guest, and I couldn't imagine starting this series with anyone else. Thanks for being here, Brandi.
Well, thanks for that wonderful introduction. That was very nice.
Yeah, you're nice. And also don't get used to it. I'll be mean in like 5 seconds.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'm prepared, so.
Great. So let's jump right in. Okay. This first section of Real Talk is focused on mentorship, something you are highly qualified to talk about. So let's just jump right in. Did you ever actively seek a mentor, or did mentorship find you?
There was definitely a point in time, so I actually think this starts with like growing up, right? And I think a lot of, you don't realize it is like mentorship, but I definitely growing up, like looked for people that I could learn from and kind of set goals based off of their experiences and like, oh, I want to grow up to be like them. And so I think my whole life I did that. It's something that I talk about all the time is like, of course, my parents were great mentors and they're amazing. But my grandma, my dad's mom, was probably like my biggest inspiration in life. She raised 5 kids and worked full time and was an incredible wife and grandma and person. And so to me, I feel like learning from her and learning how she balanced all of that was my early introduction into mentorship in life. And I think that's important when you talk about mentorship, that you have, somebody who mentors you throughout your life and then also throughout your career. Sometimes they can be the same person, sometimes they can overlap, sometimes they're a different person. So I want to start there to talk about like that there is sometimes a delineation between the two. But as far as career-wise, when I was starting my formal career after college, I didn't really think about mentorship, if I'm being totally honest with you. I did have someone in my life tell me, like, I want to say I was maybe 23. I had been in my professional job for probably just under a year. And they told me, hey,
because DoorDash keeps calling. I need my husband to deal with it. Yeah, come on. We'll just edit that out. Thank you. Okay. All right. So, starting your professional career.
So when I was about 23, probably maybe a year into my professional career, I had someone in my life tell me, hey, you should find a mentor. What does that mean? What do you mean a mentor? Like, I have a boss. Doesn't that count?
Yeah. What?
Yeah. I was like, no, but like my boss, he works, which I will say, my first boss, professional boss ever, was an incredible mentor to me. And Peter was absolutely amazing. And I think that it didn't make me feel like I needed a formalized mentor for a while, because he did that. He filled so many guys. I remember him giving me advice when I was like purchasing a home too, on like home buying, and mentoring me through just like my career and the university politics, all those kinds of things. And so I didn't feel like I needed a formalized mentor. And I remember talking to this individual and being like, oh, you should have a mentor outside of, your boss. And I was like, oh, really? And I think something that I've learned is that it's okay if your boss is your mentor, but it's helpful when your boss isn't, because sometimes you can have that different perspective. And so to answer the question, I didn't really seek it, but it was kind of thrusted upon me that I should. But until, honestly, I wanted it to happen organically. I wanted it to be somebody that I really clicked with, and I felt like I had a genuine connection with them if it was going to be someone outside of the boss that I really liked and really valued his opinion and feedback. So I wasn't really searching, and I think that's helps it be more organic, in my opinion.
Yep, we're going to have a lot of people talk about that when they come on, because I do think there is this pressure to like find this perfect mentor or force it or use this, foolproof system that is seldom foolproof. So
yeah.
Next question: who was the first person who made you feel seen in your life or work?
Yeah, so I will just kind of focus on, I would say, like the work aspect of my professional career. I'll be honest, I didn't know after college what I wanted to do. I had no idea, and I loved what I did. I worked in college. I worked at Great Harvest, and I absolutely loved it. And I knew that was a job that I was like, oh, this is so fun. So I knew I wanted something that was fun, was exciting, brought joy to my life. A big part of working at Great Harvest I enjoyed was getting to deal with people. And I didn't realize the skill sets that doing managerial work at Great Harvest would give me in the professional space. And really interviewing with who later, Peter Moose, who later became my boss in my first job, interviewing with him made me feel seen, because I remember him talking to me in that very first, it was a second round, but it was really my very first formalized University of Utah interview. And he had said to me, like, it's really great that you're have manager experience at Great Harvest, and you seem to have the personality for what we're looking for in managing college students. And I had never even thought about a managerial role outside of the one I was kind of in, but it was a college job. I mean, I loved what I was doing, but it wasn't anything compared to the job he hired me for. And I think that he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. And then he continued that. And I really, the 3 or just over 3 years that I worked for Peter, I treasured them. And I remember having conversations with several people I worked with, my family, being like, oh, I know I really should continue my growth in my career, but I just love my boss and I love my job and I love what I'm doing. And he made me feel valued and seen. And one thing he would always say to me all the time is, because I ran our student philanthropy and engagement program, he'd always say, it's your program, you get to make the decisions, and I will, support you in public and maybe I'll give you that feedback in private, but it's your program, and sink or swim, you get to make those choices. And he really empowered me to use my instincts, and I grew so much in that role. But it wasn't something that, we talk about imposter syndrome all the time, and it was something every day I had imposter syndrome. I was like, wait, I'm in charge? What do you mean I'm in charge of these 65 college students? I'm 22. What do you mean? And so I think that is so important to remember, of like, I figured it out, but every day I would go home and be like, okay, so like, I'm in charge. Oh, there's an emergency. They're looking at me. I have to have a plan. And that really developed me from a young age. But it's definitely having that support of an incredible boss made it better, and made it really easy to navigate in those spaces.
Well, I feel like you did a great job of explaining, like, I think people say things a lot, like, I felt so seen. Yeah, but like, what does that look like? Or what does that feel like? Or how does someone create that context or that space?
Yeah.
And so I do think even it connects to what you said earlier about, like, I want it to be natural. I want to find the right person. I just want it to be right. Like, when did you first feel seen? Like, oh, that's a really good question to assess if maybe there's somebody in your life right now who could be a good mentor to you. Like, who makes you feel seen in what you do? And I feel like that's a great example of that.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of feeds into my next kind of question, which is, how did your understanding of mentorship change as you got older? And I think about the work you and I had the opportunity to do together, and like, as our careers grew and progressed, our knowledge of things changed, our understanding, our expectation of things changed. And so curious about your answer to that.
Yeah. So I definitely think you think of the, right, you put it in a box of a mentor, like this is what a mentor is supposed to be. And at 22 years old, or 23, I guess, when really the mentor conversation started, like, okay, this is what a mentor is supposed to do, supposed to be. I'm supposed to meet with them once a week and talk to them about my career decisions and all of that. And I was like, no, that's not, to me, that's not what fits my life now, you know? And that definitely, like I said, when I wanted to bring it, you know, have a mentor that was organic, it was really important to me that it was somebody that I didn't have to formally check in with. It was like I was going to lunch with you because I was excited to go to lunch with you, and you were going to mentor me on some things, and we were going to have a conversation about work or life or whatever it was, but not because it was a thing to check off a to-do list. And I think that is something, as I've gotten older, of really understanding that mentorship shouldn't feel like a chore. And having a meeting with your mentor shouldn't feel like a thing on a list that you have to do. You should be excited about it. You should be pumped to want to do that. But I also think remembering that your mentor is a human too. And the person that you see as a mentor, they're going to have flaws. They're going to mess up in life. They're going to not always make the perfect decision. And sometimes their advice is not necessarily either going to fit your life or going to be the thing that you think is right for you. And that's okay. And I think that's where that trust in the relationship has to come in, where the mentor you have and you really go to with a lot of those things, has to be okay with, hey, you're not always going to make the decision that I give you advice on, and that's okay. And if you make a different decision and it doesn't pan out, I'll be here for you and I'm going to help you pivot. But I also think several mentors in your life is important. So, I think sometimes having somebody who isn't totally in the weeds on everything you do in your job or in the organization you work for is helpful. But I also think sometimes having somebody who's really in the weeds and understands the politics and the different players and those kinds of things inside the institution or company or wherever you work is helpful, because they may have a different perspective. But I am a big believer that, and it's something I say to my dad all the time, because he always jokes that, like, as my sister and I have gotten older, he's like, I try not to give you guys unsolicited advice. And I'm like, no, give me the advice, because I take advice from everybody and then I filter it, right? And I filter through what works for me. And I think that's really important when you have different people in your life that you trust from a mentorship perspective, where you can say, okay, this part works really well for me. I don't know if this applies to my life. And as I've gotten older, that's something that I've learned, that just because somebody has a certain title or is a certain age or has a certain amount of experience, they're not always right. And their right may not be right for you. And I think that's something that's so important to remember, and something that has definitely shifted my perspective on what, mentorship looks like for me as I've gotten a decade into my professional career.
Well, I think you hit on something that I know you and I talk about a lot. When you're talking about, going to lunch and having conversations or whatever. And I think about, people need to be aware of who they surround themselves with and who they spend their time with.
Yes.
Because I think, can you have a deeply meaningful conversation about something you're doing on your way to get coffee? Can you have that conversation about what is the next step, or what is the next thing I'm doing, or is this the right move? Can I have that conversation over lunch? Or are you surrounding yourself with people whose advice you wouldn't take? And that doesn't mean that you should cut off all of your friends and only try to level up your social circle. This is not Bethany's advice, ditch friends and climb a social ladder. I think often, I would go back to us at the beginning. Are we talking about work? Are we talking about what's next? Are we talking about how to innovate something we're doing or the problems that we're having? Or are we just making small talk about the weather? And so I think there is this, the world is a mentor if you surround yourself with the right people. Mm-hmm. And if you surround yourself with the wrong people, it is equally as unhelpful.
I totally agree with you. And I think, right, that the saying of, show me your friends, I'll show you your future, that it can be kind of harsh sometimes, but I think it's so true, because to your point, you want people in your life that are going to continue to support you in the things that you're doing and advise you, but advise you in a way of like that you respect their advice, because I know that I've encountered people in my life where they give me advice and I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's never happening. And it kind of gives you like that aha moment where you're like, maybe this friendship isn't for me, you know?
Or like maybe, I think this is the other thing that we've also talked about, like maybe that person's a coworker. Yeah. Maybe that person's a neighbor. Maybe that person is my chiropractor's daughter. Like maybe these people are not people we're building with, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think I would also come back to like you and I have very similarly aligned values.
Yeah.
And so when I think what to look for in a mentor or even your group of people that you allow to speak into your life, values alignment is going to be an important part of that conversation.
100%. I totally agree. And I think it is sometimes important too to remember that like you may be a person in your life's mentor or somebody they look up to, and that's okay, right? Like you don't have to, everybody, to your point, right? When you're saying, you know, I'm not telling you to cut all your friends off and be like, hey, I just need to level up my life and my social circle, which, you know, sometimes it's true. Sometimes you have that friend where you're like, you know, but I think it's important to remember sometimes you as long as you see people for the reality, right? Then you're able to see, okay, so maybe I am that person in that person's life that's providing the support that they need, or the mentorship or the guidance or the motivation to do more and be more and excel. And I think that that's important, but, you know, something that my dad has said my whole life is like, you know, don't let people pull you down. And, you know, you flip a coin enough times, it's going to come up heads. He always is very much of like the game of chance. It's just very Gary coded, you know, and, but it's so true. The more, you know, the more risk. And he's like, you want it, like, life is hard enough. You want to surround yourself with people that are going to continue to build you up and not pull you down. And I think that's important. And I call them energy vampires, people like that, because I can't actually physically spend too much time with people who are really negative or not excited about life, and that's a challenge for me, and so they suck all my energy out, and so I call them energy vampires. And you know, it's hard to be around people, for me at least. Some people are okay with it, that are that way, because they don't feel like you're not building, you're not growing, you're not finding the positives in sometimes what can be a tough situation. It's a lot easier to handle when you see the win. And I'm not always 100% great at it. I'm human. I'm not always 100% good at it. Sometimes I like to wallow and be frustrated with things, but I really try not to spend too much time in that negative space, because it will be detrimental to your success and forward momentum, in my opinion, you know.
Well, and I think that kind of dovetails when we think about who we choose to spend our time with. When did you first realize that, like, I think this comes back to, like, how old were you when you started your first job at the University of Utah?
22.
You oversaw how many students?
I want to say like 65-ish, around that.
Yeah. So, like, not old. Like, in many senses, you're a peer. And so I think aging in your career is interesting. So, like, when did you first realize that you were a mentor to someone else?
You know, that's a really good question, because I think that you don't realize it until you've done it a few times, right? Like, you've given advice and you've supported. And I would say at 22, a lot of my students saw me as a mentor, and I had a lot of students who were either my age or older, which was really weird, in the sense of I was like, wait, me? I don't know. You know, and I was still in the phase of my life where, you know, I was a 22-year-old. I was still living my life and having a grand old time. And my life now is very different than it was then. And to me, I was like, I shouldn't be giving anybody advice. I don't even know what the heck I'm doing. And, but I definitely, students saw me as a mentor. And I see that now. In the moment, I didn't see it at all. But in more of a formalized capacity, I would say maybe, the first time I really recognized it is probably about 5 or 6 years ago, when I ran another student board, our student alumni board on campus, and I had students that were truly asking me for like formalized advice on how to navigate situations, how to deal with political climates at our institution, how to navigate approaching leadership with concerns, how to interview, all those kinds of things. And then after that, having students reach out to me saying, asking, hey, can I buy you coffee? Can we talk about this thing? Or I'm struggling with this. And it felt more formalized, I would say. But I think, at 22, I was seen as somebody who was supposed to be able to give them advice or mentor, and I sure was not. And I will say I get imposter syndrome. I'll give somebody advice on how to deal with a situation. I'm like, that was right? And a lot of times, right, I'm sending you a text being like, so this is the thing. This is what I told them. What would you do? And a lot of the times, right, to your point, we have similar values. And so we typically agree for the most part on things, but it is sometimes nice for, me to go to my person to be like, hey, this is the situation. This is how I advise them. That wasn't a crazy thing to say, right? And I think that's important too, to remember that just because someone's advising you doesn't mean that they're 100% confident in their advice, or not having imposter syndrome the whole time, being like, but you're coming to me, and I think that's important. And it's important to also, I always tell people, I'm like, I'm giving you this advice, but do what feels right. Take it with a grain of salt, because I never want to give somebody advice and it not pan out, and then them be like, oh, I can't go to her to advice. She gave me bad advice one time. And it may not have been bad, but it may not have been perfect for the situation, because you don't necessarily always know all the ins and outs, all the players, all those kinds of things. And so I think that's important too, to remember when you're taking advice and when you're giving advice, that it's with a grain of salt,
Well, and that really feeds right into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is what role does humility play in mentorship? Because I think for me, there is this like immediate moment when someone first asks you for advice, and you're like, you kind of feel honored. And then you're like, oh no, like the weight of this is real. And like, I definitely don't want to be asking for advice to somebody who doesn't feel that weight.
Yep.
Like that's, I think that is an important part of the conversation around mentorship. Like,
yeah.
What is your framework for managing this relationship?
Yeah. And I think that's so real, of like, humility is so important in so many aspects of your life. And I think people who don't show humility, who aren't showing their human side, are not people I want to surround myself with, because I think it's important to have a vulnerability aspect, which I think like ties so deeply into being like having humility. Is like being vulnerable to say, I encountered this thing and it didn't pan out well for me. And so maybe on this subject, I'm not the best person to advise you, and that's okay, because I'm still learning too. And I'm still navigating life, and I'm still figuring it out. But I think though those conversations can be really challenging to have, because you have to have so much self-awareness to say, yeah, I'm not perfect in these settings. And I will say something about, and I know you and I kind of share in this a little bit of the experience of, as you grow in leadership, I think you're kind of expected to a little bit have this sense of, oh, I make all the right choices and I know exactly what I'm doing all the time. And I think the thing I respect most about leaders that I respect and I go to and I really want to work for are folks that show their human side, their human elements, and remind people, hey, I'm not perfect all the time, or we're going to figure it out together. And also, which to me ties into how I mentor and how I even lead in a lot of aspects, is that mistakes and messing up is a part of humanity, and it's a part of being human, and it's not the end of the world unless you're, like a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist. Probably the end of the world for you. But thankfully, I don't work in that industry. Couldn't.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah. If you didn't do that,
kind of work.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
Yeah, and you know what? Respect the heck out of those people. Couldn't be me. But I don't work in an industry that it's not the end of the world. We're going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. And I actually see failure as an opportunity and as a place to say, okay, how can we pivot? How can we grow? How can we learn? And that's something that I think is important, because when you lead a team in a lot of aspects, right, this leads back into mentorship. When you're a leader, you're seen as a mentor a lot of the times to the staff members or the students that you lead. And it's important that you never make them afraid to make a mistake or have hurdles that they need to overcome, because if it's not okay to mess up, or it's not okay to be struggling, then you're either never going to hear about it, or by the time you're going to hear about it, it is catastrophic. And that is what we want to avoid. And I think when you create that humility and that, safe space to have those conversations by you being human first, then they're going to come to you. And I've experienced that truly in real time with a lot of my staff is when I am vulnerable, then, and I don't think some leaders will say like being vulnerable makes you less respected or a leader. I don't subscribe to that at all. I actually think it makes you a better leader, a better human. And when you lead with that vulnerability, and you're not upright, I'm not spilling my life to my team. I'm not like, oh, this horrible thing happened to me, let me tell you all about it in trauma dump. That's not what I mean. I mean, like,
no, we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Not at all what I'm saying. But I think it's important, like when you go through something in life that's challenging, like, I've gone through deaths in my immediate family and things that have been really challenging to overcome. And when you're able to be human with your team about it, they're more likely to open up to you about certain things too. And you're better able to assist and understand them of like, hey, today may be hard, or this whole week may be a challenge for them, and I understand why, and they were able to confide in me in that, and I've made a space that they feel comfortable navigating through, and I think that's important, and it's speaking to that like human side of you, which in my opinion makes you a better person to lead a team and to be a mentor and to support people, because you're not this like perfect, or perceived as, right, this perfect person.
Yeah. So to wrap us up, what's something you're still working on?
Life. Which I think like truly it's a real answer, right? Because I think, when we talk about where I started my career almost 10 years ago at this point, at the University of Utah at 22, I really thought I would have it figured out by 10 years later. And I'll know what I'm doing, and, I'll really have everything ironed out perfectly. And I think there's so much humility in saying, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like trying my best every day. There's things I know a lot more of like what my strengths are and what I'm really good at, and where I thrive, but I also not perfect, and I'm still ironing out how to be better in a lot of areas. And I think that's important to remember. And I also think it's important to remember that no one has it figured out. Even, like my parents, they're amazing. They're awesome. They've been successful. I still have conversations with them and they're like, we're just going to figure it out together. Like, wait, what do you mean? You thought you were supposed to know how to do this.
Isn't that some point like reach where you know all of the things?
Yeah. I'm like, wait, so you don't have it all figured out? What do I have to look forward to? And I think, right, I'm not a parent yet in life, but I think that that's the thing that comes up a lot in parenting, right? Where I've heard a lot of parents talk about like, how I thought I was just supposed to know how to do this, and everyone's kind of figuring it out, and we're all like, well, I tried this and that happened, so I guess we'll see, and then you have the next kid and it's like, well, that didn't work on the first one, so let's try this different on, and I think that's the reality of like, and giving grace, I think, is so important in those spaces of remembering everybody is still figuring it out, everybody, and people may have mastered one thing, You think about people who specialize in a field, right? You think about a doctor or a lawyer, you know, somebody who has a specialty and they've mastered that. But there could be another area of their life. They're like, I don't know how to boil an egg, you know, and they're still trying to figure out that aspect of life. And so I think it's important to remember that we don't have to all have it figured out. It's important to have a network of people that we can turn to and a support system and a group of people we trust that we can go to when we're still trying to figure those things out, and know that we have a network to lean on, because I think that's so important as you're navigating life, no matter what age you're at, what point in life you're at. Challenges are going to look different, but the people that you trust and support hopefully are going to be able to guide you through those spaces of parts of life that you don't know how to navigate. And I think that's important, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I really appreciate the conversation. I think in closing, any advice you have to give before we're done?
It's funny because it's something that I hear a lot, and you probably like hear from social media and influencers and that, but I think it's so important, is that comparison is the thief of joy. And that is something that I think is so important, especially as you kind of reach milestones in life. I remember going through my 20s. Okay, I'm 25. I should have this, and this. Or I'm 30. I should do this, and this. And it's important to set goals, right? And it's important to say, I want to do this by this, and whatever works for you.
Director by 30?
What?
Director by 30?
Yes, and I did that. So
I know you did. Becoming a goal-oriented person.
And it's important, it's helpful to set that goal, and that was a goal for me, and I was able to do it. But I also think, you know, then I achieved that goal, and it's like, oh, well, this person's doing this and that. And that's something that I try to really catch myself in now, is not comparing to others and not comparing to what anybody, because you don't know what's going on in other people's lives in a lot of different facets. And so I think it's important that you don't compare yourself to others, and you're on your own timeline. And I really hear people say it all the time. And I think sometimes people are like, yeah, okay, but how did they get there? And there's a difference to me between learning from other people who are successful that you want to learn from and grow towards some of the cool things they're doing, or learn how they were successful, and comparing yourself to them of like, oh, well, they did this by this age, I should be doing that too. So I think being able to tell the difference is really, really important, of where am I learning and where am I comparing? Because I think it can become a fine line of when you're so deeply ingrained in learning from what other folks are doing, then you start to compare yourself to, well, they did this by this age and I'm this age and I haven't done half of those things. And it's important to just trust the timeline that you're on. I am a faith-based person, so I trust, you know, God's timing. Not everybody is a faith-based person, so you can trust the universe timing, whatever fits for you. Yep. And for your faith, I think is important, and for, you know, that you're meant to be in the position that you're in right now for a reason, and you're meant to learn something. And I tell myself this every day, because not every day is perfect, right? And so I remember to tell myself, what am I learning from this? Because I'm going to look back in a year or 5 years and be so grateful for the lessons that I learned through this time of life. So I think that's important.
That's it. I love that. Where am I learning versus where am I comparing is a great place to leave off. So I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.